Hello everyone, in this video I'll be ranking the best Bard subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 on a tier list. I'm just going to address the elephant in the room right away. The Sword Bard is what I believe to be the most powerful subclass in Baldur's Gate 3. This is due to a variety of reasons, most notably the itemization in Baldur's Gate 3 is fantastic for the Sword Bard. They also have a ton of really great illusion and enchantment spells, which are also very overpowered in this game. Things like Arcane Acuity, getting a plus 10 to your spell save DC with one single attack as a Sword Bard is absolutely crazy. So there's a lot of great things about the Sword Bard, but I also have some other really great points about the other subclasses as well. Like the Lore Bard, for example, gets some benefits from the Eloquence Bard, which didn't make its way into Baldur's Gate 3, which makes it a little bit more powerful in certain aspects, which we'll explore in this video. But first up, we're going to address the Sword Bard and how broken it is and a variety of different things that make it this powerful. I just want to quickly touch on itemization here at the start because this single item here makes this build broken. So the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, it's a rare, it should be a legendary item if I'm being honest. After you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cast an illusion or enchantment spell as a bonus action, and the Bard gets access to pretty much all of these, including command once they hit level 10 and get the magical secrets. So you can do a lot of harm after doing 2 slashing flourishes and then sending this off. Slashing Flourish, again, being able to attack 2 targets at once for the cost of just an action. You can use this twice per action, actually, and a cost of your Bardic Inspiration, which is a great use of it. Now, a nice little trick you can do with this, and what makes the College of Sword Bard so powerful, is level 10 is really the last level you need to take as a Bard. Your level 6 spells as Bard aren't really amazing. So what you can do is you can actually dip in and take 2 levels of the Paladin, which gives you Divine Smite, and if you set that to a reaction, your Slashing Flourishes will now deal an additional 2d8, and you can actually take your spell slots all the way up to level 4 to get scaling on your smites, so you can do some serious damage numbers with Slashing Flourish, because now you're able to attack 2 targets and likely one-shot both of them because of the Divine Smite damage that's being added on top of this. Another powerful thing without multiclassing is the Range Slashing Flourish, which they haven't patched it out yet, so it's likely never going to change, where you can Slashing Flourish and hit the same target twice. There's a lot of balancing mods out there that remove this feature because it is pretty strong. Now, there's other ways you can hit multiple targets at once as a Bard. I really like just using the Arrow of Many Targets with some other gear that we'll get into a little bit later. You can get your plus 10 to spell save DC so that you can land your control spells as a bonus action and make sure that they do land. This build is pretty much possible to solo with too, because they do get some invisibility spells like Greater Invisibility. The Gloomstalker Assassin Ranger build is obviously very powerful for soloing honor mode, but you can do it with a College of Sword Bard just due to all the great abilities that they do get. And we also get things like your Defensive Flourishes, which can increase your armor class by 4. And this is even further enhanced if you take something like the Hexblade and get the Shield spell. So you can increase your armor class by 4, and then with Shield, increase it by 5. So you can get pretty tanky as a Sword Bard. You also have the Mobile Flourish, which allows you to teleport to your attacker. So at level 3, they actually get quite a bit. And you also get the 2-weapon fighting style here, which is great because you can then use your hand crossbows if you're playing as like a drow, or if you get a weapon proficiency elsewhere. And then the dueling feat is also nice too if you want to use a shield and keep yourself a little bit even tankier. And at level 3, one of the best spells in the game is Hold Person, because this allows you to get free critical hits off against that enemy. And what's even crazier about this is if you got 2 really difficult enemies that you're fighting against, you can use a upcasted Hold Person, and hopefully they're beside each other, because then once you got Hold Person off, you can go in and do a Slashing Flourish, and if you got those extra critical, or if you have the extra smite damage on top of your Slashing Flourish, your crits get an extra die on top of them, and also your smites get an extra die. So you can one-shot a lot of enemies with this combination, and that's just what's so great about this, because as a bonus action, you can also cast Hold Person as it is an enchantment spell. Same thing here with Invisibility. Being able to cast these both as bonus actions is crazy. And that, again, is because of the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, after doing a melee attack and being able to cast this, which you wouldn't really be doing as a Lore Bard, because the Sword Bard gets an extra attack at level 6. This is similar to the Valour Bard and the Blade Singing Wizard. Getting an extra attack is just a really good option when you're in combat, because it allows you to choose between casting spells or going in for attacks. And once you reach Act 3 with that special item, you can do both. It's actually pretty crazy. And the nice thing about this too is not only are you getting an extra attack, but your flourishes hit 2 people. So it's effectively 4 attacks at level 6, which is pretty broken, because as a fighter, Eldritch Knight fighters can get 4 attacks, but they have to do a Booming Blade for one of them, and it eats a bonus action. You can do that with just your action at level 6, which is pretty broken. And even once you hit level 7, you get a couple really good spells here. Confusion being another spell that you can cast as a bonus action with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. It's a huge area of effect, and the enemies only have a 1 in 10 chance of acting normally. Most times they'll attack their other teammates, which pushes the action economy in your favor, because now you have the enemies taking out the other enemies. It's an underrated spell, I'd say. And greater invisibility, doing greater invisibility things, you can actually get this going pretty crazy. This is a really great spell for casting on other people. If you have a ranger in your party with Pass Without Trace, they get a +10 to their stealth checks. Because the way greater invisibility works is you keep rolling stealth checks, and you can stay invisible if you keep succeeding on them, but they get increasingly harder. So it can go really well on a variety of team comps. And I also want to mention that you can cast this on like your cleric if they're low on health and you need them to go invisible and hide away. You can do this. Now, all bards do get access to magical secrets at level 10, but this also enhances the sword bard because you can take things like Conjure Elemental to be able to pull an extra tank for you. You can also take the ever powerful Spirit Guardian, since you will be getting into melee range. This will allow you to do radiation damage against them as well. And as a medium armor wearer, you can actually spec into radiating orbs and have a lot of success there. This also gives you access to some offensive spells like Scorching Ray if you prefer having something like that. It doesn't include Booming Blade, unfortunately, so it's best to take a dip for that. But you can also take Counter Spell, which is a fantastic spell. And the last one I want to mention is Banishing Smite, which is going to eat up your action, bonus action, and concentration. But it does a 5d10 of force damage and possibly banishes your target to another plane of existence if they have 49 or less health points. So this is also a really good choice as well, because we're going to be doing a lot of melee attacks. It does have an arrow point and a finger pointing, but you do this on melee attacks or range attacks if you want. So very powerful. You also can take Hunger of Hadar, although I want to mention that Hunger of Hadar doesn't scale well into the higher levels, but you can cast it at level 3 unlike a Warlock. So you actually get a little bit more usage out of this in certain instances, but my personal preference are Spirit Guardians. Cone of Cold, my probably favorite spell, because if you got a teammate that can set up water, you deal double damage with that, and you're going to be in melee range anyway. So I typically take Cone of Cold and Conjure Elemental with the Water Elemental as their main punch. Can apply a weakness to cold damage, allowing your Cone of Cold to hit for double damage. Of course, that's something all bards can take, but it's nice for a sword bard to have options when it comes to combat. And I guess the last one I'll mention is with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, you can take Command here as an enchantment spell and do this as a bonus action. However, my preference is to take the Paladin. And not to mention the Bard also is great for the face of the party because you get the sleight of hand check bonuses or persuasion bonuses. One good thing about taking the Bard to higher levels is you do get access to Otto's Irresistible Dance, which is an enchantment spell again, but this isn't always as good as like Hold Person, because while this does give you one guaranteed turn of taking an enemy out of combat, there are other better ways, I guess, with like Command and Hold Person that I find, at least anyways, without burning through your level 6 spell slot. I did mention that the Paladin 2 levels is a great multi-class, but the Fighter is too, because 2 levels of Fighter gives you all weapon proficiencies and Action Surge. So yeah, with the Paladin, we want to go into our reactions and make sure that we turn our reactions on for our Divine Smites. Don't put on your level 5 spell slots, as they don't scale up. They only scale up to level 4, and it's always going to use the highest level available, so I'd actually prefer like to use only like level 1 and 2 here. And then when you pop out your Slashing Flourish, it's not going to hit them, but you'd go ahead there and you do Radiant damage on top of it, which, yeah, your Smite damage on top of a normal melee attack, on top of if you got a Hold Person off the last turn in combat from your bonus action, yeah, you can do a lot with this, because that Hold Person will make your critical hits go crazy hard, because it adds another critical hit die onto the top of the damage, and it adds another die for your Smite, so it's effectively adding 2 extra die here. It's absurd. But then also the Banishing Smite is an extremely powerful ability as well, so this can take someone out of combat entirely, which is just extremely powerful, and even if not, it's going to do tons of damage. We banished Halsin. And I said I'd mention the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, because this is actually a very powerful item that you get in Act 2. Whenever you deal damage with a weapon attack, you gain Arcane Acuity for 2 turns, which is effectively +2 to your spell save DC and spell attack rolls, and that's what the enemy's going to be fighting against to resist our spells. So currently we have a 16, I'm not optimizing this build whatsoever at the current moment, 16 overall saves DC. We can put that up to 26, which becomes increasingly hard to resist. And past 30, the enemies are pretty much always going to fail at that point. They can only roll a critical success to be able to succeed on that roll, making the College of Sword pretty crazy when you factor in the fact that they do attacks. They can cast all the different enchantment spells. Yes, the Valour Bard can do this too, but the Valour Bard does not get Slashing Flourishes, which are, to be honest, incredible. Being able to go ahead and attack the 2 targets like this is pretty nuts. And you can also attack the same target twice if you wanted to. So it's broken. I would say the Sword Bard is definitely the best. I don't think the Bard is the best class in Baldur's Gate 3. I think that belongs to Sorcerer or Cleric, just with how good spells are and Bloodlust potions, things like that. But this is the best subclass in the game, in my opinion, because it's so far ahead of everything else. With the College of Lore Bard, I have some good news and some bad news. Well, I mentioned at the start of the game, this actually gets a special benefit of applying to saving throws, which is something that comes from the College of Eloquence Bard, which is not in Baldur's Gate 3. So, Cutting Words allows you to do a 1d6 negative penalty to an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check of an enemy. So this also does scale up at level 5s and 10, all the way up to a 1d10. Now, this is really good to have for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to be comparing this to another subclass I think does a similar role. But yeah, cutting words, the good news is it now applies to saving throws. Larry did a little homebrew there from the Eloquence Bard. The bad news is you could use it previously, cutting words, to reduce the damage rolls. This is how it works in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, like the current gen, but it doesn't work that way in Baldur's Gate 3. Another, I guess, pro is despite cutting words being, a verbal component, and things like silence means that you can't do that, you can still use cutting words even when you're silent. So, yay, a little bit of a pro there. Another cool thing is if you like Vicious Mockery, this pulls from the same dialogue pool, and all the origin characters have their own lines for this. So if you want to play Astarion as a College of Lore Bard and hear him use cutting words, you can do it. And another downside to this is it'll oddly sometimes trigger on your own teammates on a fail for whatever reason. So yeah, it does have a bit of bugginess to it, but I think across the board it's pretty good. Now, I did mention I'm going to compare this to something else, and that is the Light Cleric. The Light Domain Cleric gets their Warding Flare, which I think is just a little bit better. So with Warding Flare at level 1, they get the ability to turn an attack roll into disadvantage. So the enemy rolls 2 die, take the lower result. Whenever they get to level 6, they get the ability to do that on their teammates as a reaction. Cutting Words, I don't think holds up compared to that, since both use your reaction, but Cutting Words actually eats up your Bardic Inspiration as well, which you could use for other purposes. It's a really good ability, though, and we'll get into kind of the reason that the College of Lore Bard is still a good choice, even though I think the Light Domain Cleric does its job a little bit better in a lot of ways. The only thing it really is, this is a charisma-based class versus a wisdom-based class, so that's obviously a huge thing if you're the face of the party. All the skill proficiencies that the Bard does get to on top of all that, so there's obviously reasons for picking the Lore Bard, but this ability, I do like the Light Domain Cleric a little bit more on my team after running both of these in different playthroughs. I find I get more value out of a Light Cleric. Obviously, this very heavily depends on your team composition overall. Sometimes you just want to have the dexterity base like Bard on your team over a Cleric. Now, the other big thing that the College of Lore Bard gets is Magical Secrets at level 6. So this is an extra boost. The Valour Bard as well as the Sword Bard obviously get their extra attack at this level. So this one also does have that comparative power spike, because this also lets you take Counterspell, which a Cleric doesn't get. I want to highlight that. So there is some really nice reasons to pick this subclass, because you get access to this and Spirit Guardians at an early level, which I think is a really nice choice. You can also take some other spells that are a little bit more niche, like Pass Without Trace if you want to boost up an ally's stealth checks to a +10. This also lets you take Eldritch Blast if you really wanted to. Better to take the Spell Sniper feat than taking this, but you got that option there. You can even take Bless here if you really wanted to. My personal preferences are Hunger for Dar, Spirit Guardians, Counterspell, and Lightning Bolt if you're going to be taking spells at level 6. But the top two, in my opinion, are Counterspell and Spirit Guardians, or Counterspell and Hunger for Dar. Note that both of these are concentrations, and they kind of suit a different purpose, so depending on your team composition, sometimes you want to have someone with Spirit Guardians. And another note is if you do have a Cleric on your team, you can only affect an enemy one time per turn with Spirit Guardians, so it's not really there's no real point to affect an enemy twice and have two teammates running Spirit Guardians at the same time. Now, the Lore Bard is a really hard class for me to kind of gauge. I've used it throughout my entire time playing Baldur's Gate 3 with thousands of hours in this game. I like the class, but I oftentimes am running something that's going to kind of do what it already does, but a little bit better. As mentioned, the Light Domain Cleric is what I think to be the best Cleric in general, because it's great for Radiating Orbs and all things related to debuffing, where you can't actually wear the medium armor required for the Radiant Orb build on a Lore Domain, or a Lore Bard, unfortunately. But the big thing is they do get Counterspell, and also you can get Counterspell and Spirit Guardians at level 6, which is really nice. But you could also effectively have a Light Domain Cleric and then have your Sorcerer, Wizard, or Hexblade Warlock running your own casting of Counterspell. I always like to have at least one person, typically 2 people on my team, but I typically run a Sorcerer and a Cleric most times. So this one really heavily depends on your team composition. That's where I think the Lore Bard really does shine in a lot of ways. As the Cutting Words, not only is it really funny, it's great. It's a really effective ability to help protect your team. It becomes a 1d10 later on, and it's arguable. A 1d10 might be a little bit better in disadvantage in certain instances, just really depends. It's a great class overall. I really was thinking, like, I was going to put it in the S tier for this video, but after just considering my previous experiences and what I find I get from this subclass. I just think that it does kind of lack in terms of an identity, because it kind of, for me at least, you're going to want to take your magical secrets to level 6, and this kind of builds how you're going to take the character. But I do find that you oftentimes are getting a little bit more value out of taking something else instead of this subclass. So yeah, I just feel like it has a bit of an identity issue compared to obviously like Sword Bard. You know what that's all about. But yeah, I just feel like there's something missing to put it in the S tier. I know some people are going to be really upset because I do like the Lore Bard, but I just don't think it fits as well as the Sword Bard in this game. Now, I previously used to think there was no reason to ever take a Valour Bard, because they do get the same extra attack the Sword Bard gets, but they miss out on all this extra combat effectiveness. But the Valour Bard actually does bring some very useful things to the table. So with the College of Valour Bard, you actually get the same medium armor proficiency that you're going to get from the Sword Bard, but instead of just getting scimitar proficiency from the Sword Bard, you also get all martial weapon training and shield proficiency. I always run a half elf, so I don't have to worry about the shield proficiencies, or a half drow. I just like playing as them, and the shield proficiency is just great to have on anyone really that doesn't get shield proficiencies. And if you play human, you're going to get that as well. But for those that play as like a full-on elf, or anyone that doesn't get built-in shield proficiency, this is actually a really good choice if you want to rock a shield, which I do think in most instances is better than running 2 weapons. And if you're going to do that, you're probably running a Sword Bard. But the big thing here is the Bardic Inspiration, Combat Inspiration. Now, the thing is, the tooltip for this is terrible, and it actually makes a lot of people believe the class is worse than it actually is. Yes, you do get the bonus action Bardic Inspiration, but this is actually Combat Inspiration. I thought they would change the tooltip for this to make it a little more accurate of what it actually does, because it's actually giving you Combat Inspiration. So yes, you can add a 1d6 to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, but they can also choose a 1d6 bonus to the damage of their next weapon attack, or to their armor class for 1 attack. And this scales up to a 1d10, so effectively you can add 10 to their armor class, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, the Combat Inspiration, if you were to just glance at the Valour Bard, you'd be like, that sucks. You only get to do a bonus action, but it's actually going to either increase the enemy's or your target's damage, or give them an increase in their armor class. So this is actually a lot better. And the only other subclass feature they get is that extra attack at level 6, but I just feel like this is a little bit more empty of a choice, because with the Sword Bard, your extra attack means that you can do slashing floors, bing, bing, slashing floors, bing, bing, hit 4 times. The extra attack here just means you can stab, stab. Like, it's good, obviously. This is really nice. This is what makes like the Blade Singing Wizard so great, is the combat like versatility that you do bring to the table, but I just don't think it's that good in comparison. Like, yes, it can run the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, but again, it's just not able to put out the same amount of damage. You're doing half as many attacks as a Sword Bard could do. I guess another item I should mention for itemization is the Wondrous Gloves, because these add an additional 1 to your Bardic Inspiration and 1 to your armor class, which is actually really good. You do get your Bardic Inspiration back on short rest, but this allows you to spam your abilities a lot more frequently and get a bit more tanky all in the same go. But again, the Valour Bard, it doesn't have slashing flourishes. The damage output is going to be lower than the Sword Bard in every single combat instance. There's no combat, I don't think there's any situation where you're going to get more value. Yes, the Bardic Inspiration as a bonus action is actually really nice, but as mentioned, once we get to Act 3, we do have some really good bonus action abilities, and that's also, not to mention, you do have Healing Word as a bonus action, and if you got a Sword Bard, you can do offhand attacks too for a bit of extra damage. So yeah, it's kind of debatable if this is good. The Valour Bard, I would say, is best if you want to do a sword and board bard. It's a mouthful. Because they get the shield proficiency, you can run a bunch of different weapons. You're not locked into just using a sword. Like, you use a spear, for example, and then on top of that, also have the Bardic Inspiration, not worrying about your offhand attacks. I think the Valour Bard is it's a really good class overall, but this tier list is weighted because this is so heavy. Like, the Sword Bard, again, best subclass in the game, and it's I would say bounds better than the other two in a lot of instances. The Valour Bard is still good though, and if you want to play one, you're going to have a great time, because at the end of the day, it's a bard. It's great. And the newest subclass, the College of Glamour. Now, I've tried extensively to make this feel good. It doesn't. It just doesn't. I do think that it's missing like something that the other subclasses just do a lot better. You get the Mantle Inspiration here, which allows you to imbue 2 and later 4 enemies with Vigor and grant them 5 temporary health, which later becomes 11 temporary health. If they're hit with a melee attack, the attacker becomes charmed. This is great because it's like one of the few ways you can just apply charm really easily without thinking. This is a bonus action Bardic Inspiration, and yeah, you can affect more targets and more healing later on. Level 6, it scales up to 3 allies and 8 temporary health, and at level 10, it becomes the 11 health points and the 4 targets that you can apply. Now, temporary health works weird. Like, if you want to use the Whispering Promise, that ring you get from Volo in Act 1 that gives less on heal, temporary health doesn't count as healing. So that's one thing you don't actually get. The Cap of Curing, which is a hat you can get in Act 1 that gives you health whenever you use your Bardic Inspiration to heal a target, also doesn't end up applying this bonus. So a lot of things actually don't actually affect this. And also this Charmed, if you get hit with a multi-attack, which does multiple attacks in a row, you don't actually charm against those multi-attacks either. But if an enemy is using an extra attack, like they do their attack and then they do their normal extra attack, it works against that. So it works as intended for that kind of charm. At level 6, we get the Mantle of Majesty command. This is similar to the command spell, but this isn't a spell. If you look right below the Mantle of Majesty, it's class action, which is kind of funny because this actually lets you cast this as it's not a spell if you're raging, which is something you should never do, but it's possible. So basically, you can see here, it's the command spell by a different name. It does require your concentration, so just a heads up on that. The Barbarian Rage will break that, but you get to apply it for a turn. Now, this has, you can keep applying this for 10 turns, but where I think that using the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, again, going back to that, is the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, if you upcast it, can apply to 6 targets. With this, it's 1 target. So, yes, it doesn't cost a spell slot, but I do think that it's better in certain ways because it comes built in as a bonus action. At level 6, you can do it right away. But again, the Bard is just, it's not really an amazing spellcaster. It gets carried a little bit more if you have like magical secrets from the lore Bard. But yeah, it's not a really good caster. So we do have just some good crowd control spells like enchantment and illusion spells. But again, you can do those after doing a melee attack, which just makes this a little bit worse. It is nice to be able to do things like a command approach off on an enemy without using up any of your spell slots, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because it's command is a level 1 spell. You can get it from dipping with the Paladin, and I actually think that that's one of the best multi-classes in Baldur's Gate 3 is 10 levels of the Bard and 2 levels of the Paladin. Slashing Smite Flourish is just so crazy, and that makes this class look a lot worse by comparison, obviously, because they can do a Slashing Flourish Smite on 4 enemies, potentially KOing 4 enemies, and then if you have a Bloodlust Potion, that's another 4 enemies. And then they also get the bonus action ability to cast command on 6 targets. So, in my opinion, the Sword Bard, it's just due to the meta of Baldur's Gate 3 and how combat is over so quickly, if combat was extended to, like, if normal combat lasted 5 to 10 turns in Baldur's Gate 3, this other subclasses would be more powerful. But the Burst Nova potential of the Sword Bard just makes them all look worse in comparison, unfortunately. And the Glamour Bard, despite having some cool abilities, I think it's a fun subclass. The temporary health is just not as good as the other abilities you get from the other subclasses, like Cutting Words or even like the Valour Bard's shield of proficiencies and the combat inspiration, and then the Sword Bard just absurdity in general. So there it is. That's my ranking of the Bards in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm always curious to hear what other people think about these, so feel free to write a comment with your thoughts on the Bards. The Sword Bard I just think is so far broken. It's crazy and just makes the other ones feel worse. I did want to initially put them like this. This is what my original draft was, but I did decide to move these both down. I do think the Sword Bard belongs in the S tier by itself because it's so crazy strong. I can't say the same thing about the Lore Bard, and I know it's going to upset some people, but just my thoughts. Feel free to leave yours below, and I hope you have a great day. We'll catch you all in the next video, and subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.